All right, guys, let's talk about what is a ratio, as that is our first part of Module 1 today. So a ratio is a comparison between two numbers. Here's some examples of things that we could possibly compare. So we could compare the number of apples to the number of oranges. You could compare the number of boys in a class to the number of girls in a class. You could compare the number of wins that your team had to the number of losses you had for the season. You could compare left-handed students to right-handed students, or you could compare those wearing glasses in a class to those not wearing glasses. Now, those are just a few examples, as there's definitely an endless number of things that we could compare. So let's look at a couple examples together. So here you see a picture that I took of some of my son's toys. And again, a ratio is a comparison between two things. So in this picture, we're comparing vehicles and planes. And there's a few different ways that we could say or write about this ratio. So we could first say the ratio of the number of vehicles to the number of planes is 5 to 2. There's 5 vehicles and there's 2 planes. Another way we could say it is that for every 5 vehicles, there are 2 planes. Or we could say there are 5 vehicles for every 2 planes. So there's different ways that you can write about it. And I will be giving you those sentence frames too to be helping you as you start practicing writing ratios. Now, a ratio can also be written in 3 different ways. So one way that we could write this is 5 to 2. So when you compare the two numbers, we use this word to, T-O, to separate the two numbers, 5 to 2. We could also write it using a colon in the middle. We would still say it exactly the same way though. We would say 5 to 2. Or we could write it as a fraction. We could write it with 5 as our numerator and 2 as our denominators. And as we're going to see, ratios are very similar to fractions. So let's look at another example. Here we have some Ninjago Lego figurines compared to some Star Wars. So I could say for every 2 Ninjago Lego figurines, there are 8 Star Wars Lego figurines. So my ratio is 2 to 8. I could say something like this. The ratio of Ninjago Lego figurines to Star Wars Lego figurines is 2 to 8. And like I mentioned earlier, just like fractions, ratios can be simplified. So I mentioned that ratios are very similar to fractions, and that's also the case when we simplify. So instead of saying 2 to 8, I could simplify that by saying 1 to 4. So I divided the 2 by 2, and I divided the 8 by 2. And when I simplify that, I come up with 8 to 4. Or I'm sorry, 1 to 4. So 1 to 4 would be equivalent or the same as saying 2 to 8. Now we are going to get into some practice problems together. So please have your book ready or your Kami assignment open. Also, here are the sentence frames for you to refer back to help you as you begin writing about ratios today in class.